not gonna throw this thing, I'll break something. Spectral Shield Throw, woo! Hi, Zizaran here with another League starter for 3.15 Expedition League, and this is a build collab with Steelmage, who will be maining this build as his League starter, and this is Spectral Shield Throw. It saw a significant buff in 3.15, and this should be a really nice build after all the changes. Another thing that's really nice about this build is it's going to be pretty much a right-click build. You don't have to worry about multiple abilities. However, one downside is it's obviously not fully tested. It's a new build. And, well, I guess that's not true, because we did have it last league, and it's just buffed. Yeah. Never mind, scrap that part. Something that's really nice about this build is that it is a right-click build. It's going to be very easy to play, and should be incredibly strong. And with somebody like Steelmage using it as his starter, you'll quickly find out if it's really overpowered or completely trash. But on paper, the skill looks like it should be incredibly strong, especially because if it wasn't, Steelmage wouldn't be starting with it. He only plays OP builds. Now, if you aren't familiar with our League starters, we have a early tree, etc. So you can see exactly where to put your points as you're starting and playing the build. It also shows you what ascendancies you're taking, and this is a gladiator. And obviously in the start, we get the nice gratuitous violence, so you get bleed explosions to help you with clearing. And then at the end game, we have a skill tree without clusters and with clusters, so you have something to scale the build in the late game as well. Early on, we start out leveling with splitting steel, and at level 12, you can switch to shattering steel. Then, at level 38, we start getting Spectral Shield Throw, and you can level with that from then on. Remember that the base damage is based on the armor or evasion of your shield. Later on, you can see all the late game links here, and it should be very strong. And we are also using Corrupting Fever. Now, there might be some concerns of keeping the buff up with Swift Affliction, and if that doesn't work, if the buff is falling off and you would have to recast it all the time, then you would have to do Empower instead of Swift Affliction. It should be fairly reasonable to keep the buff up, and the way it works, it's similar to Blood Rage, where you cast it, and then if you've used enough life, because you don't use mana, then it would be refreshing its own duration, as if you cast it. And we're using Mortal Conviction and Blood Magic, so should be very easy to use enough life. And that means that this build is also not going to have any mana issues. Obviously, every build is going to struggle a little bit on mana. A lot of builds are going to need mana potions, etc. But this build should be really good for that problem. Now, this isn't a 2-button build, so you don't have to worry about any clunky gameplay there, but for single target, you do want to make sure that the actual shield part is hitting the boss that you want to do the most damage to. As for items, we have a basic and an endgame set. Early on, there are some really useful uniques. A Prismatic Eclipse with 3 greens will give you a large amount of attack speed, and a Lionized Remorse isn't the best shield, but it is an early good pickup if you find it. However, if the price is really high, just get a high armor shield instead, and keep a lookout for shields with high armor. Another good thing to get early good shields is to use Dread Essences on a Colossal Tower shield. And it should be pretty okay to get one with more than 1.7k armor. Obviously, Lionized Remorse has 180 life, but you can get a large amount of damage. If the shield is very expensive, don't use multiple exalts on this. Early as well, a Tabitha Rasa is more than okay, and a lot of the gear is pretty simple. Quite a lot of people like having at least one Pierce on this, which you can either craft on gloves, or you can get the Pierce Jewel from Act 5 from killing Ultuya? It's called something like that. We can get Onslaught on boots, and a lot of the gear is pretty basic to make sure that it's a really good League starter and easy to play. Where you get the resist doesn't really matter, just make sure that your character is resist capped, and I would advise in 3.15 to get more chaos resist than normal. In the endgame tree, you can see that there is actually no unique items, and we'll walk through it a little bit here. Here we have a Warlord one with the chance to bleed, increased damage with bleeding, and fist dot multiplier as a craft. The shield, just close to 3k armor on the shield. Helmet, pretty easy. Obviously, the helmet enchant is what is really important here. And Elder Chest with percentage life. We do want to get as much life as possible on the build. Getting over 7,000k life should be pretty doable and feel really good. Hunter Gloves with physical damage over time multiplier. We also have regen on boots, and we also have the important stat of bleeds you inflict are 10% faster. Fist Dot multiplier on the amulet, and then we have Vermilion rings with just life, and we have a Elder Belt, which if you can get a Stygian would be really good, obviously, but a leather belt would be really great. On jewels, you want to get the damage with bleeding and increased life, and you have some examples for cluster jewels, etc. to go for. There are a bunch of notes as well, so if you are struggling with something, you can look up here, and also Steelmage is going to be playing this build, so you can drop by his stream and ask questions if you're struggling. So another thing that's really cool for this build is obviously there's another new skill coming out called Shield Crush. And respeccing to a build like that shouldn't be very difficult for this. If you do a Bleed Shield Crush, then it would be a very, very small respec. And if you would do something like Impale, you might have to go Champion or Slayer. But obviously you wouldn't have to re-level a completely new character. You would just get 40 to 80 regrets and then respec. So we have some pretty cool choices depending on what other skills turn out to be very strong. Next up, we'll go through the Q&A for what to fix on the build. Are there too many gems to equip? This should be pretty easy because if you need to, you could drop the cast on damage taken setup, so it shouldn't be hard and you don't need any unset rings for the build. Can the player have any mana issues? Nope. This is a really, really strong thing about the build that we're using blood magic, so obviously you're going to be leeching back life and you don't have to use any mana flask on the build. During leveling, you will use mana early on, and then you can just use the enduring mana flask. As far as sockets go, this build shouldn't have any problems with that, and you shouldn't need any unset rings or anything. As far as sustain goes, especially late game, you might want to be careful about ever using deadly ailments. It reduces and makes 80 less damage with hits, which will make that any leech you do from the actual hit part will be really low. And late game will have something like Vivid Hues on a cluster jewel, which is in the cluster jewel tree, and this will give you a large amount of leech. Late game as well, we can use a Glorious Vanity with Immortal Ambition. This will give us Slayer Overleech and be a large amount of defense, and at this point we would put it close to the Call to Arms node and stop using a Warcry. So this build should be very, very strong overall, and I have a lot of hope for this build. Should be fairly easy to do on solo stuff and as well. There's no like insane stuff that you really need to be trade league to buy. So a really good choice for Leaguestarter. Should be great at bossing and mapping, and obviously it'll feel amazing with the Blade Explosion. Hope you guys have an amazing time in the upcoming 3.15 Expedition League. Good luck. Make sure you check out Steelmage on Twitch, and sub if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.